Okay. Fantastic. Okay, well, this is pretty exciting actually, because as I say, we've been working on this now for over 12 months through WoodSolutions. So WoodSolutions engaged Thinstep to pull together a database of all of the timber information we've got out there. I mean, all of us, I think, are pretty active in this area now, so we're sort of pretty knowledgeable on what's needed here. But I mean, we would all know data is key in any of these things. You've got to have the right data, or you just get the wrong sort of answer. So whether we're looking at a full LCA or just looking at a sort of embodied carbon impact, data is certainly key. And one of the things our sector's found particularly frustrating is that everyone's been using the EPIC input-output hybrid database, which is a great resource. Don't get me wrong, I'm not being negative on it. In fact, you know, I don't know, 15 years ago when Graham Trelaw was still alive, who got input-output hybrid stuff going here in Australia, I did quite a lot of work with him at Deakin, and his postgrad student, Robert Crawford, has sort of taken it on since he passed away. And University of Melbourne did a great job in how, you know, what they released here. It's a really usable sort of database they've got at the moment, really easy to access on site, and a really good hard copy if you want it. And everyone's using it. So wherever you go, you know, this is the data they've been using in the past. So even things like the Green Star advice that they've got at the moment says, you know, really you should be using EPDs in a process-based approach, but you can use a hybrid input-output approach. Also, as most of you know, Basics has just released its materials index, so starting to look at embodied emissions in the residential sector, and it's actually also calling up the EPIC database. So probably, well, and even when Meckler was looking at this, you know, we were all asking the question, why is everyone using EPIC? And really the answer was because it's out there and it's publicly available and it's easy to use, and we needed a process-based database, because reality is an input-output hybrid approach is not the right approach for looking at building products or looking at buildings. I mean, I think anyone that understands this appreciates this. I mean, input-output is a top-down financial nationwide sort of assessment of a sector. I mean, that's where it gets its value. It's very specific to a country. So it's not much good for looking at imported products and trying to compare things. Whereas a process-based approach is, you know, is a bottom-up scientific approach, which is based on, you know, a set of internationally accepted standards and is used quite globally. But the other thing from a timber perspective, that's where we get a bit passionate about this, is the input-output data is just wrong for timber, and we can't understand why. And we spent a lot of time with Robert Crawford trying to sort of drill down into it, and he can't even give us the answer. But this little sort of image on the right-hand side gives you a bit of an indication of this, where it shows the embodied energy. I know it's not emissions, it's energy. It's a little bit old, the data, for an elevated timber floor against a concrete slab. And you can see it's suggesting that an elevated timber floor has twice the embodied energy or emissions of a concrete slab. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense at all. So as I say, well, we can't work out why it is, but really there's been a lot of investigation now into the right processes, we all know, and neighbours have really led the way here, and they've done a fantastic job. I mean, all of us have been consulted by them over the past sort of 18 months as they've been pulling together their database and their guidance. And so now we've got this hierarchy of data, which I think hopefully is what everyone will accept nationally now, where environmental product declarations and EPDs and a process-based approach is the sort of peak sort of version you use there. And they also identify climate active, which uses EPDs anyway. And then if you can't get data from either of these approaches, then Neighbours is putting together a set of conservative default values. So that's going to be a really great resource when it comes out shortly. Also, just with Neighbours, as most of you know, from a timber perspective, what they've decided is in their greenhouse gas star emission, they won't include the biogenic value, even though industry would like to see that included in there, but they're going to report it separately. So actually, I think that's a better way to go, because the biogenic value is not lost within the actual individual star rating, amongst a whole lot of other things, but people can quite see the biogenic value of building a timber building. So I think they're doing a great job there. And some of you are probably on the seminar, the webinar that James Elks did as part of Meckler a couple of weeks ago with Neighbours. This is, I suppose, the first sort of indication that he showed us of what their database is going to look like, but it looks like a pretty conventional spreadsheet with the materials, the units, the densities, and then they'll have an emissions value there. And I understand for timber there'll be a biogenic value in addition to the fossil value. So we're still to see that. Been chatting with James this last week. He said they're due to release something on that shortly, but they haven't sort of released exactly what their database is going to look like yet. So in terms of from our sector in the timber industry, we've got obviously industry average EPDs. So FWPA through WoodSolutions publishes 7 of these. One's for softwood, one for hardwood, one for particle board, one for medium density fiberboard, plywood, glue laminated timber, and white cypress. So they've been out for quite some time, and they're fairly regularly updated. But our industry has actually been pretty active in this area, and there's lots of the producers now who've gone out and invested in their own product-specific EPDs, which is great. So there's a whole range of those in the market for locally produced timber, and then a lot of the imports that we bring in all have EPDs, so they're available as well. So what we wanted to do as an industry was take a little bit of a lead here and grab all that information together and aggregate it into one source, just to help people that want to use the data, because we talk to them all the time, and everyone has to go out and get the EPD and pull the data out of them themselves. That's why we need a bit like Epic, we need a sort of national sort of database of building material information. So we've worked with Thinstep on this, and they've released it to us just a couple of weeks ago. It's just been released publicly last week, but this is what it looks like. It's pretty simple. This is just the about page you come to when you open it up. Thinstep provided 2 versions of the database. There's a fully editable one, which FWPA will just keep, so it can update things as EPDs get updated or new ones come in. And what it's Thinstep has done is simply locked all the cells in this one and taken out some of the worksheets that did some calculations in the back which aren't particularly relevant. So this is what you'll see when you open it. You can see down the bottom there's 4 worksheet tabs about a visual guide, timber products average, and FWPA EPDs, which we'll look at individually. And as I say, this first one just has a little bit of general information about it. That the second tab there, the visual guide, just explains what the different columns are. So things like, what's the product category, the product, the EPD type, is it industry or average or product specific, obviously the quantity, which is a key thing that people will need. And then it talks about biogenic, or it's got a biogenic carbon stored value in there, but it also talks about, I guess, the 3 from a timber point of view, global warming potential values, which are the carbon emission measures. So the fossil value, which is the one that everyone will be reporting, then there's the biogenic value, and then if you add those 2 together, you get a total value. So it just explains what the different columns are here for users. But this is what you see when you go to the worksheet for the different timber products. And just to highlight sort of what some of the information that's in here, I suppose these 3 columns you see here, G, H, and I, are going to be the 3 key ones. And really, I suppose column H is the one that most people doing carbon takeoffs use. So that's the fossil value. So if we look by example at our softwood EPD, and this is just an illustration that's pulled straight out of that. So our softwood framing for our industry average EPD, you can see some of these numbers and where they come from in here. So you'll note that in the forest, just on the left-hand side of the diagram there, it talks about that there's, for a cubic metre of softwood, there's 900 kilograms of CO2 that's biogenically stored. So you can see that number there in column E. Then in the forest, there's a little bit of biogenic emission, so things that might degrade to methane and nitrous oxide and stuff like that. That 24 kilograms is that value you see there. And so if you subtract 24 from the 900, you roughly get that 870 minus 875 value in column I. So that's where that number comes from. And then you can see with the graphic there, the fossil greenhouse gas emissions, those values in black that run across the centre there. So you can see there's about 34 kilograms emitted during the harvesting process, around 7 during the haulage to a site, around 33 kilograms in the processing, 67 in the kiln drying, 15 in the planing, 1 in the packaging, and all of those fossil emissions add up to that 157 kilograms. So you can see the number there actually in column H. And then, as I mentioned, if you add the minus 875 and the 157 together, you get that minus 718 kilograms, the total value, which is in the green box, but you can also see in the column G there, so cell G9. So in terms of the A1 to A3 values, though that sort of gives you a bit of an indication of what they are and where they come out of our normal EPDs that we have. So in addition to this industry average value, which is a cubic meterage value here, but what they've also done is done a calculation for specific products. So you can see this line here is about softwood framing. kiln dried and dressed, a 90 by 45 stud. So that would be the typical stud we would use down here in Victoria for pretty much all our framing. What Thinstep have done is just done an internal calculation based on the industry average value to give a specific value for that product. So it saves the quantity surveyor having to do that calculation themselves, even though they can easily do that. It just has just meant that it's made it a little bit simpler for people. And you can see just under that in those different rows, you know, there's values there for a 90 by 45 stud, a 90 by 35 stud, 70 by 45 and 70 by 35, which are pretty much the standard sizes that are used right throughout Australia. Queensland uses a bit more 70 framing than the rest of Australia, but yeah, those values are there. In addition, where there is a product-specific EPD out there, they've also included that information. So this is the Timberlink one for its actual softwood framing. So it has values slightly different to the industry average ones. You can see it's marked in column C there as a product-specific document, and then there's a specific value given if you knew it was a bit of Timberlink framing that was being used. And similarly with some of the engineered wood products, this one, an example here just highlighted is the EPD that XLAM has for its CLT. You can see there's a cubic metre value there. We talked about putting individual or additional sort of rows in there for specific thicknesses of CLT, but because there's quite a few, you know, we didn't think that was worthwhile. And the quantity surveyors actually, when we spoke to them, said they were just as happy to calculate that. So you'll see the value there is a cubic meterage value, and people can do that calculation based on the thickness of panel they're using. In addition, what we wanted to do was to capture all of the products used in Australia. So the database includes both locally produced products or imported products. So you can see in column A there, it defines there whether it's an imported product or not. So we did go out to pretty much anyone we knew that brought a product in here that was used extensively in the construction industry and asked them if they had a publicly available EPD. And if they did, we've tried to include it in the database. So just under those product categories in column A, and we can look at this afterwards when I pull up the actual Excel spreadsheet, you'll note that the products are listed under these 4 different headings: structural timber products, timber internal appearance products like flooring and lining, timber external structural and appearance products, and they tend to be products treated to a different chemical treatment level, and then timber landscape products. So I'll show you after, but in effect, there's 91 different products that are listed here in the database. So as I mentioned before, FWPA through WoodSolutions publishes a number of specific industry average EPDs. We've got 7 of those, and they cover 28 different products. So some of them have multiple products in it. So the little worksheet that's down the bottom here, this one on the side here, the 4th one, is useful, but people will probably use the timber products one, but Thinstep has done a great job actually putting all the information from those FWPA databases into this worksheet. So say people won't use this all this often, but it's very rich with the information that's in there. So you can see that in addition to the actual value that it uses, it also includes the minimum and maximum values. So that value at the top, like you see in 6, which is the mean average, is what you see under the timber product sheet. But also what we've included these minimum and maximum. Now, this is important because we're still wanting to see what neighbours are going to produce, but they're suggesting they may actually be publishing from an industry average DPT that maximum average value, because really that's a more conservative case, like a worst case in terms of emissions. I mean, their argument there, which I suppose sort of holds true, is that, you know, they want to make sure that if people are using an industry average for a sort of conceptual design or something, it's the worst one that they've got, that they can use. To be honest, we're sort of saying to them, you know, we don't think the difference is all that much, and it's only going to confuse people, but we've got the value there if people want to use it. The other thing that this spreadsheet has, which is important for LCA practitioners, in addition to the A1 to A3 values, which are really what we use for that upfront investigation, with an LCA, you want to use those other stages, the C3 and the D stages. So there's information in this spreadsheet that is in the EPD for people that are doing that more sort of extensive LCA calculation. And then the other one here is it also supplies for our industry values for those different products that are treated with different treatment levels. To be honest with you, most of the products aren't treated to any of these levels, and what we've done in the timber products worksheet is actually given values of the products that people really treat to. But this spreadsheet allows industry to go back and do a quick calculation of these if they ever treat the products with another treatment. So this is quite a valuable one for industry. So as I mentioned, it was released just last week. People can access it through the WoodSolutions website. If they go to WoodSolutions to the front page of the website, there's a link. When they click on that link, they'll go to this page here, which just asks people to register their details. The reason for this is we just want to make sure we know who's using the database, so that if a change or an update is made, we can contact those people to let them know there's a new one out there. So when you infill your information there and click the button, you'll go to this page, and there's a link there when you click on it that just allows you to download the database, and then you'll go through to this page, which just allows you to do a sort of normal download of the file, so you can get that Excel spreadsheet. So I might just stop sharing that screen, and happy to take any questions now or share the actual database screen if you want to sort of see that. Yeah. Okay, this is the actual database. So that's the about page there, and that and the visual guide. And this then is the once I'm doing that, this then is the actual sort of series of 91 bits of data that are in there. Let me. That's better.
So Alastair, can I presume this is available on the website somewhere, or via a link?
Yeah. Just go, as I say, just go to the WoodSolutions website, and on the face page of when you go in there, there's a story there about this being released. If you click on that, it gives you the link straight to where you can download the database.
Thank you.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that this is the actual timber product database when you're in there, so you can see all the different products that are included. But you can also see they've done quite a good job here up the top here with these little sort of open and close buttons. So you can open that up and see all the production values you want. But if you're an LCA practitioner and you wanted some of this other data, which most people won't use, sorry, that was on the next spreadsheet I was going to show you. That there's also information in here, quite a lot of detail about the different products. It describes where you find them. It actually
Alastair, is it possible to get a copy of your presentation afterwards? Just because that explanation is quite good. Helps my understanding. Thank you.
Yeah, no problems at all. So I was going to show you on this one. So with the FWPA industry average ones, it's also got all these sort of C3, C4, and D values in here. So yeah, there's a lot more additional information that's sort of included in this one that, as I say, most people won't use. But if you're an LCA practitioner, you know that will be something certainly of value. Any other questions just on that?
I was going to ask you again just about this is A1 to A3 only at this stage, based on data that's, I think you touched on readily available via EPDs, which you're just bringing together in one central location, right?
Yeah.
It'd be, I don't know how we get there, mate. I know we talked about this a number of times, but 4 and 5 is another sort of venture on its own, isn't it? And it relies on getting accurate feedback via relevant parties.
Yep, no, you're absolutely right there. And so with A4, most EPDs don't actually have to include that, but I know some of the product-specific EPDs do have some A4 values in there. They're not in the database, but it's probably something we should think about pulling it out where we can and putting it in something separate. I know we've been chatting about that with Mekla, but I know XLAMS, for example, has some A4 values for tracking things around Australia, and I think probably some of the international ones probably have some values for shipping. Yeah, A5 is a little bit different because that's about construction, so that's how you're putting things together and constructing it on site. So that wouldn't typically be something product-specific EPD would cover. So sorry, when I was clicking across here, I couldn't see it before. This is what I was looking for. But I was probably looking a bit silly when I was having a look. Well, one of the good things in here is that there's actually hyperlinks to all the actual EPDs in here as well. So that saves people a lot of time. If you've looked up a product and you want to actually get to that EPD, to get more detail, you can actually click on this and it'll hyperlink straight to the EPD. That's a huge sort of job in itself.